Hello.
Hey, Glenn.
Hi.
I've been, ever since I first started talking to you, I've been, you get people thinking a lot. Like, you start seeing,
that's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
You can't convince anybody, but you can make them think.
Yeah, like Socrates said. Yeah, and I see the signs everywhere.
Yeah.
It's all adding up, and yeah, and I talked to Watt, and he like exposes himself by the way he acts.
Yeah.
I don't know. But then I try to, I'm trying to. He's so secretive. That's the thing with him. He's really secretive, and I can't. I don't know. But.
Because he has information beyond what he speaks of. He's kind of in a bind. He obviously is not allowed to share all he knows.
Yeah, that's probably part of the whole thing with the secret society. Probably because they make you almost like bind yourself. You can't. Like, I don't know. But I don't know. But yeah, I was watching on TV. There was a documentary. It was a propaganda piece, but it was on some History Channel, and it was talking about the Neanderthals, and it brought up how they tried saying oh, the Neanderthals were. A lot of people mistake them for being idiots because one of the bones that they found was from somebody who was crippled or something like that, and then they said one of the first sites they went was in a cave in northern Israel called Kabara, and then there was another cave called Hayonima, and they were saying how the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthals, they probably both met somewhere in the Middle East.
Well, it in what I have read, it seems like their origin is at the Sea of Marmara on the Bosphorus in Turkey. It's the other side of the water from Greece. And there's a place called sounds like Chalice.
What, in the Middle Eastern area? Or?
Well, it's in Turkey at the Bosphorus, but they certainly would have land route connections through Turkey and Syria, and would have been involved in the activity that created Egypt as we know it, and Jerusalem and Sinai. It's my view that they were more linked to water than clan mothers. The Mediterranean Sea of Marmara that enters the Bosphorus would be a reasonable place to conclude, because there are signs of them having lived anywhere from caves in France all the way through to Mount Sinai. And the middle point would be Turkey. There is a place in what is now Syria that seems to have been associated with teaching of people who would then become royals or pharaohs or whatever. That it was like a university. In an area of Syria which is basically controlled by the Kurds. And the Kurds, of course, are the symbol of cheese. Cheese is important because it basically tells you that the underground spaces are all mined and tunneled out in living spaces.
Oh, okay.
And the collapse of that area would be easy enough to accomplish if you've riddled a place. So strip mining is how people deal with a place that is undermined with a whole bunch of caves. Gaza Strip, for example, the Israelis have gone in and bombarded the place, basically to collapse as many of the tunnels as possible. They may be doing the people of Gaza a favor by destroying the surface, because it's certainly one of the areas that would be in difficulty should there be a tsunami or a flood or something like that, because all of that is subject to collapse. And the place most likely to collapse is the Michigan Peninsula. Everything under Lake Michigan has been mined from Milwaukee in underneath the water, from the peninsula itself down, from the lake area. There's an island called Ile Royale in which they've been mining copper since the Indian times, way back. The original natives who lived there, which probably were descendants of Aztecs. So it wouldn't take much to collapse that. And if you look at Michigan, I told you before, its shape is like a mitt. Mm-hmm. Alan Watt, his last name, Watt, in the code is mitt.
Yeah, that was in the plan. Yeah.
So he's got some information he's not sharing. And part of what he's doing, I guess, has to do with, trying to focus attention on me.
Well, he's not trying to, he doesn't even like to mention you.
Well, he has done it in a surreptitious way. And that's by publishing my material and demanding that nobody copy it because it's his. When you do that in a forum like the Internet, mm-hmm. It's a matter of time before somebody suggests that, hey, how can you be asking people to not do what you do?
Yeah, but, he told me, he says, oh, well, he's like, well, I handed out that stuff before even Glenn, like, way back. He was handing out stuff to you and your team, and he was handing out, like, written stuff to you guys, and to get it out there.
He never handed anything to me until such time as he had a subscription to my papers and had been speaking to me for years.
What? And then he says, he's like, I only spoke to him a few times. Wow. Damn.
Yeah, a few times a week.
For years? Wow. Damn. But when I would ask him things about, like, like because he used to go on another radio show. He would say, "Why are you fishing? Why are you fishing for?" Like,
well, that's what you do, don't you? You're a fisherman because you're a seeker of information. You can't seek information without asking questions, especially of those people who don't seem like they want to tell you the whole story.
Yeah, he tries to make you feel guilty about asking questions. But that's what got him. He's kind of slick, but it kind of got me. I was getting pissed off. I got pissed off thinking about it.
He's no different than most Scottish people. They have a job to do, and it's an equivalent job to the Israelis. They're good cop, bad cop type of role they play together. They come from the same area. They have similar backgrounds. And a bagpipe is the official musical instrument of Turkey. And they wear dresses. They call them kilts.
And he said also that he's like, well, I have information about Glenn, but I'm not saying it.
Well, let him say it.
And I was like, wow, but I think he was just saying that just to like create some type of mystery.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but
there's a lot of information about me. I'm 68 years old, so.
No. Yeah, no, I asked him like, because he said, "Oh, it's not paying enough. This stuff, it just doesn't pay." And
it doesn't pay. I mean, anybody who gets into the business of seeking real knowledge and expects to make money at it better have their head examined.
Yeah. And I'm like, "Well, don't you have another degree in something else?" And he's like, "Why do you want to know about my personal life?" But I've wrote him letters about my personal life. Tell him about my personal life, and that and I felt offended when he said that. But hey,
he's a Scotsman who basically, if I can believe what he says, worked for banks, married into a banking family, and was surprised at the fact that he was expected to service the wives of some of the banking's top executives. So what? So what? Goats have been doing that for years.
Yeah, he's even referred to himself as a goat.
Yeah. A scapegoat.
Oh man. So yeah, I'm looking into these. I'm trying to understand the coding a little bit more. I'm reading your articles and stuff. One thing I'm trying to get this straight. Like they call Jesus Christ character. He was the liberator, right? They call him the liberator. That's why he's shaped like a Y on the cross.
The one they have in Argentina, stuck up on a big rock, is called the Redeemer.
Yeah, also the Redeemer, too. Yeah.
Redeemer means the repo man, the guy who cashes in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
why you have IRS in Christ, and you have IRS in the financial community, who are your tax collectors. And they're in the process right now of redeeming.
Okay.
They're cashing in their chips and taking it back. Their main code word, if you trace this IRS back, it's Polaris, the North Star. Yeah. So you have P, and you have Ola, which is the Spanish term for high, and you have IRS, Polaris, Sir, IRS.
That's why they call each other Sir, too, in the military. I thought it was just because they named it after Sirius the star.
No.
But
Polaris is a period of time, because a North Star is not the North Star to this planet forever. It only is there for a certain number of years. Vega has been a North Star. Alder Amin will be a North Star. So when people lived in the past, they looked at the North Star as being the center of activity. But because the Earth wobbles as it goes around its orbit around the sun, over a period of time, things that are in a certain place are no longer in a place. So they have a precession, which is 25,800 years, which is the entire circuit from beginning to end, and then it starts over again. Within that precession, there are subdivisions on which the North Star plays a role, and since it changes over time, it tells you which part of the precession they're in. My suggestion is that in 2009, we are in the first year of a new precession. We are in the age of Aquarius, the water bearer.
that's also the gene pool, too, right?
I beg your pardon?
That's also that water that is also like the gene pool, right?
Well, it's the creation of life. Yeah. Water brings on new life. Yeah. But it brings on new life by first destroying old life. So the period in which we are going through is the end of one kind of life, like we had the end of the dinosaurs or the mammoths. Now it's the end of the group called Polo, the pool, in the northern hemisphere. So two things have to happen. Water has to cover the part of the land where most of the people work, so that most will die, and a new land must appear. There is a series of children's books which you should read. It's called The Chronicles of Narnia.
Narnia. How you spell it?
Narnia. And they basically simplify what is really going on. I think there's 7 books in the series. It's by a guy called C.S. Lewis. Now, of course, C.S., a C is a 3, and an S is a 1, so that's 31 or 13, depending on which way you look at it. And a Lewis is L-E is le, like le or la in French, so it converts in English to the word the, and the balance is whiz. Wizard, one definition, and Ms. is another definition, and Sam is a third, Uncle Sam, and Maz is another definition, because an I and an A are interchangeable. A W and an M are interchangeable. The suggestion when you have a double letter, such as an M or a W, is that you really are just speaking of twice the original letter. So an M is really two N's.
Yeah.
And so is a W. But it could also be two C's, because an N on its side looks like a C. So one of the important codes is between two C's.
Oh.
John McCain has two C's. There are two C's, like the Atlantic and the Pacific, and the activity that will occur at CERN is basically two C's, because you have CERN, and an N can be a C, so therefore it's between two C's. So it's means two, and then you have a C on either side. So it's the most likely thing that will begin by creating a spark when the atoms collide in a collier. Collider and collier are almost the same word, with the letter D in one and L in the other. A collier means a coal mine, mining place underground. Collider will cause the spark that will explode the acetone, that will begin the process of burning the coal seam around the world.
And the black one.
And there is one of these colliders in Russia near Moscow. There's the one in Switzerland, and there's the one in Chicago. And they basically will feed to each other. So it's like a transmission cable. Stanford University has a linear collider as opposed to a donut-shaped one, because it's basically at the end. So in California, you will get the message in the coal seam to light the fires. That's why there was a monk by the name of Seurat who went from Mallorca to California and set up 13 monasteries. Attached to these monasteries, he planted vineyards. A vineyard is the source of grapes. Grapes are the source of wine. Wine is the source of vinegar. Vinegar is the source of acetone.
Wow.
Acetone blows up sufficiently to light the coal seams. Acetone is the igniter used by nature to cause a volcano to explode. Usually on a mountain, you have a lake. Underneath, you have lava. You need something between the two that will cause the explosion. It's a little bit like New York City, Manhattan. Underneath Manhattan is a set of steam pipes. Steam pipes provide helpful service by bringing heat and energy to different buildings in Manhattan. However, steam pipes are basically a bomb waiting to happen. And we saw it happen in one of the streets of New York a couple of years ago, when in the middle of the street there was an explosion that went up to the third or fourth floors of the buildings around it. That's because when you superheat pipe with steam on the inside, as long as it's protected by earth, you don't have a problem. Mm-hmm. But if there is a sudden amount of water, cold water, that seeps through the earth, as you would get from a tsunami or as you would get from month-long rain, when the water from the surface touches the steam pipe, mm-hmm. you get a reaction between hot and cold, which causes an explosion. And in Manhattan, at one stage, if it's only one place where it happens, they shut off the steam from the pipes in all directions and then go repair the problem and keep on working. However, were Manhattan to receive a permanent flood of water mm-hmm. from the Atlantic Ocean, as would be created by a tsunami or an explosion from the Titanic that is basically sitting there waiting to do its job. The rear end of the Titanic is made of titanium and is equipped with an explosive device that will induce or enhance a tsunami. It's right against the mid-Atlantic ridge, so it will focus its energy in one direction only, and that is towards the East Coast, taking out parts of Canada. Maritime provinces would be in the line, and then it would be basically hitting all the way down the East Coast with a tsunami, which could bring a wave much higher than most cities are above sea level. And at Providence, Rhode Island, it would circumvent the mountains there, the Appalachian Mountains, because there's kind of a path between them, and pour into the Ohio Valley. So you, in fact, could get water all the way to the Mississippi River, Chicago, and the Mississippi River from this activity on the Atlantic Ocean coming through Providence, Rhode Island. Part of that would also be water coming up the St. Lawrence and destroying Montreal on the way through.
It was interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine. She's telling me she's reading one of your older articles that you made, and you basically said that New Orleans is going to be flooded before it even happened.
Sure.
How did you know that?
Well, it's simple mathematics. It's physics. It's you don't build a city under sea level and lean it up against a body of water like the Gulf of Mexico, which has vents right at the mouth of the Mississippi from volcanoes down below. So the volcanoes can blow, and that's one way you would get water into New Orleans. But the other thing is, if a hurricane is traveling in a certain direction and would miss New Orleans. If the underwater volcano is heating up the water there, that hurricane will be attracted to it, and it would then go up in that area, which would mean it would cause a storm surge, which is basically what happened in New Orleans. So for me, like New York, it's just a matter of time. If you're going to build a city, you don't build it in a way that it's sure to kill people unless you have a reason to do it. And these people who built New Orleans, Lewis and Clark and all of those people who established the territory, had a reason to do it. They knew the plan. They knew that at a certain stage, what they were planning was a laboratory called the United States of America, and its role would be finished, and therefore it would have to be destroyed. So its position had to be plotted on a geology map, basically to guarantee that they could use the forces of nature to destroy it.
I know they have weaponry. I never heard you mention like hard technology, where you can just create tsunamis and.
Absolutely, all of the control mechanisms over Mother Nature are in the Indian Ocean. So by being in Antarctica, in front of the Indian Ocean, and the basic passageways have all been built under the ocean, they can basically go to a place like Banda Aceh in Malaysia, like they did in, 2003 or something, and lay a charge on one of their tunnels that would allow the tunnel to break and the water to be sucked in. That's what a tsunami is. A tsunami is basically when the ocean all of a sudden is confronted with the fact that the bottom has fallen out, like a collapse under the sea. Mm-hmm. It can happen naturally in caverns, or it can happen in mines that have been dug, and it can happen if somebody put a tunnel and attached an explosive. Now, what happens to the seawater is it drops into the hole. Until it fills that cavity, it's going down. So the people on any island or seashore in the neighborhood would see the tide going out. And they'd say, oh, look at that. There's a nice piece of property that didn't exist before, and they start walking out on this, what they believe is low tide. But what they don't realize is when the water has filled the cavity, boom, at the bottom, it bounces up. And from the hole, it spreads out. Now, a tsunami travels under the ocean, under the seawater, but on top of the sediment. And it travels at a speed of jet aircraft, 400 to 500 miles an hour. And depending on how big the hole was, the wave that travels will be that depth. You know, it changes according to the depth of the hole, because you get more or less water if the hole is bigger or smaller. Now, many times what you get is a a hole that creates a wave under the seawater of 35 feet. Now, 35 feet travels along the floor of the ocean at 500 miles an hour. There is nothing on the surface that makes one know this, because it's all happening at the bottom of the water, until it reaches land. And then, of course, when it reaches land, then it's going 500 miles an hour and it's 35 feet thick, it goes straight over the land, and anybody that's standing there is going to be drowned by the tsunami. The interesting thing about the word tsunami is that it has, number one, the first two letters are T and S, and a T is a 2 and an S is a 1. So it's about 2 in 1. Then it's about Sioux, and Sioux is a boy called Sioux.
Yeah,
is a male, female on the outside, male on the inside. And the final part is ami, which means friends, which means nothing, pawns, I can get rid of them, disposable.
Wow. That's so cool.
So there you go. The word ami comes from the moho discontinuity. The part which is solid is called sima, S-I-M-A.
Yeah, I was reading one article you sent me. It's called John's German Bitch Rego Society. Yeah. And it's John Birch Society, U.S. organization, anti-communist, politically right-wing, founded in 1958 by Robert H.W. Welch, named for Captain John Birch, U.S. Army officer, killed in 1945 by Chinese communists, reportedly known for extremism. See Holland's Extreme Tracking, Queen Beatrix.
Birch is the same word as bitch. R and T are interchangeable. It's the root. It's the way they go. And a John is the word used in colloquial language to mean a toilet. And the code uses the digestive system to tell you where they are. And O and E means they're at the beginning, because when you put food in your body, it starts in the esophagus. But when it comes out, the second last thing, number 2, is caca. And number 1 is pee-pee. So they're basically telling people where they are on the code. Are they at the beginning of something, in the middle, or at the end of something? So,
and when you separate it, you put German.
Yeah,
that's Ger.
G-E-R is
war,
the
right?
first 3 letters of the word rego.
Oh.
Go again.
Oh. I thought it was short for war.
No, rego.
Rego. Oh, okay. And what do you mean when you put at the end of all your articles, you put being, Boeing, Beijing, bang?
Well, that's when you start off something, like the creation of humans on the planet, you start off by putting women in Africa. That's where the clan mothers were. What are Bing cherries? Black cherries.
Oh.
What do you call virgins? Women with cherries. So you go from Bing to bang. Bangladesh. Bang, la, female. Esh, she.
Oh, wow.
Destroy, demon, woman. Desdemona.
Wow. Well, I guess that's another reason why they don't like even in like archaeology, you don't hear anything about. I mean, I haven't heard anything about the clan mothers.
You have what about the clan mothers?
I haven't heard anything about them. I hear, you hear about Neanderthals, and the thing too in that documentary, they were talking about Neanderthal women, and how they were treated. They said they were treated like a cart, like they just walked over them, and the men they really respected. They would they had rituals where they would bury, the men who died with flints and weapons and. So
the word Neanderthaler is basically just the word that they assembled together to tell you that they are the oldest, because the first part, Dean, is linked to the dinosaur, and thalers is that they are dollar coins. Where do you use dollar coins? In gambling, in slot machines. So you can find them any place you find gambling. But clan mothers is basically described as the origin of human beings, Homo habilis, and if you read some of the stuff I have on there, I'll tell you that they found the DNA of woman, which dates back an original mother that started everything that we have on Earth today, all the human beings on Earth today. This original mother dates back to a period sometime between 115,000 BC to 200,000 BC. My suggestion is there were many of them, and most died off without having an impact, whereas one stuck. And the one that stuck is more around 115,000 BC. But you don't see the appearance of Y chromosome until 80,000 BC. So something happened between 115,000 and 80,000, and the only thing that makes sense is if woman could survive for that length of time, she had to be having babies.
Yeah.
And since there were no men, she had to be hermaphrodite, like worms and other animals that are not likely to meet a mate along the way. They start off life as hermaphrodites. As a hermaphrodite, she could only give birth to clones of herself. So from 115,000 BC to 80,000 BC, in Africa, Homo habilis was a woman. Many of them clones of a single woman. And something occurred at about 80,000 BC that divided the genders, that brought in the Y chromosome.
And that's what they meant with Jesus Christ, the liberator. Why?
What I'm saying is that if you go by the signs they use, they describe woman as an X.
Oh, okay.
A Y is an X with a broken leg.
Yeah, it's lame.
Yeah. So, who broke the leg? And my point to you is that a Neanderthaler was probably not male or female either, but it was totally different in appearance from the clan mothers. And my suggestion to you is that the difference between the clan mother and the Neanderthaler is strictly related to social engineering.
Yeah.
Where the person was raised, under what conditions, and what evolutionary factors would have upon that person. And I suggest that that person most resembles a shrub as they called themselves, as opposed to a flower for women, because they were probably raised in a place that had water as the principal thing, whereas the women were raised in a place that had deserts and jungle. And the two animals they used to describe them in those days in the mythologies is the hippopotamus or the crocodile or alligator, depending on which one you want. They're basically linked. Crocodile lives in swampy water. A hippopotamus lives in swampy but slightly deeper water. So if a Neanderthaler lived in that environment, he would be living by water, and I suggest that means he would be triphibian. He would have gills. The movie Waterworld suggests
I've seen that.
that gills are part of it. So what we're seeing develop now with Serena Williams winning her championship last night in Australia, is that she is a 10, a number one model of what they expect to make. But I suggest that she's not the final model, that there will be a number 11 and a number 12, if not a number 13, 14 and 15, but at least 11 and 12, and more likely 13. So what you're seeing in Serena Williams is the word SAR, which is what they use for the particle accelerator in Switzerland, CERN. She would be the equivalent of cereal, la SAR. Cereal is something that you eat because it quickens the passage through the body of things that have to make it from one end to the other, provides a force that creates both heat and power to get it through. And of course, CERN, because it has a C at the beginning and an N at the end, which can be a C, is also leaving the letters ER in the middle. So ER is re, and re stands for two. Second version, like the clan mother was the first version. The people on Earth now that came from Cro-Magnon are second version, and they're being converted into the third version, and she, Serena, is the closest thing to that. 6 foot approximately, built like a middle linebacker. Breasts are the noteworthy thing because that's what the male slave must have, is a way of feeding the child it will give birth to. So it's basically the first version of a modified slave.
Like these prototypes that we see out there, are they raised like differently from everybody else?
Well, they used to be raised differently because they at first were raised within the confines of the priesthood. Vestal virgins, monasteries, dual monasteries where priests on one side and nuns on the other, with a meeting place in the middle. Latter-day Saints in the Mormon group. So if you're raised in a community which is very specific in its application of reality, you're going to be different than if you're raised in a secular world. And the transfer was done in 1717 by creating Freemasonry in the secular world. 1717 converts, of course, to 88. Male is given the number 8, and the new male is 88. So the male covered with a female exterior is an 88. And that's why 1717 was chosen as the year to create secular Freemasonry.
Wow, so do you think, like, this person, like, these people, they know that they're a different...
Some would know, and others, like me, would not know, or had not been told, and had to work it out themselves along the way. I suggest that I've been married in my life to some that knew, and I didn't. Going back over all of the evidence from the point of view of looking backwards, it's a lot easier than looking forward when you don't know something. Mm-hmm. But any one called Carmen, for example, car is the vehicle and men, and therefore would you expect someone who's female to be called Carmen, a male vehicle? Why do they write an opera about it? Because an opera is about their most important works, called opus, which converts to the word soup. Soup will be the blackwater moat that is expected to kill most of the people in the northern hemisphere.
So there's people like that walking around?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could talk to a girl and then find out she's like a man inside.
Yep. Although she may not know, and there is no exterior sign, and the only way it can be determined is by a medical examination through the use of X-ray and finding a testy. Now, doctors may know by the chemistry tests, the endocrine glands and all of that stuff make chemistry, and there may be a sign through that chemistry that tells the doctor this is one of them. That's why the word medi stands for media and for medicine, because they're in on it together. The medical profession is in on it with the media. And of course, at the end of medicine, you have cine, which tells you why Hollywood is in on it too.
You got me scared there, man. I don't want to go a girl, man, and find out. So maybe that's why, like, a lot of women like that, how they think.
You will find, I guess it's hard to find it now because there are so many of them now. Mm-hmm. But those people who lived a long time ago would find that the women they slept with wanted intercourse. Today, most women don't. They prefer to have oral intercourse.
So
that's because of the influence of the man. Like having a gay man inside a woman.
Wow. So I haven't heard any case where women just become pregnant by getting themselves pregnant spontaneously. It's just because they have the testes.
Well, it's because of a thing called recessive genes. If a gene is not useful to the environment in which it lives, it basically recedes into the background and doesn't show itself. It's still there. It doesn't show itself except by accident of numbers. At one stage of the game, everything eventually shows itself at least once, and therefore the movie they made last year about life in South Africa called Skin. Two white people, both basically, what do they call them? Segregationists, Nazis. What do you call those people?
Neo-Nazi? Or?
Yeah, people that hate blacks.
Yeah. In Africa, yeah, I know.
They're Dutch descent, and they live in South Africa, and they controlled that area, and they had to give it up. But the movie is about a man and a woman get married. Two people who are white. And then they have a baby, and it's a girl, and she's black.
Oh, yeah.
And it begins a big argument in their family and in the community about who did she sleep with. And the answer is found out in court afterwards when a study of the DNA of both of them is examined. And a recessive gene is most likely to show its face when both parents carry the same recessive gene. So it basically meant that in the history, in the background history of the white woman, there were black people. In the background history of the white man, there were black people. They didn't show themselves up until these two happen to come together with the same gene. And then you get the birth of a colored person. Now, the same thing could happen in reverse. You could be two black people having a white-looking child, or even a Chinese-looking child, because that's what recessive genes do. I'm doing a study now on that. That's why I raise cats. Much easier to raise cats than raise humans. Plus, you get a lot more versions quicker. But I started off with 2 cats 5 years ago, and I have approximately 27 cats now.
Wow. Running
around the farm here. And most of them have now a common recessive gene which appears here but not amongst most cats. And I've been able to draw it out by having so many cats all at once. And since the gene is now being used and the parents both had it, and what it is cats with, instead of a cat's paw, normal cat's paw, they have a mitt, like a catcher's mitt in baseball. It's 7 toes instead of 5.